Well, we're already 2 minutes behind, so we started this session on the SFS development status and also some early research development. And this session will be chaired by me, Fang Yang from NCEP, and also Leo Barton. Our first speaker, Bill, he has 20 minutes. 20 minutes. All other speakers you will have only 12 minutes. Stand up 1 minute before your due time.
Well, hopefully I'll give time for other speakers, because I assume by now everybody in this room has read the development plan, so I could just skip to the final slide. But just in case you didn't, I'm going to go over the highlights because there will be a test at the end. I do want to acknowledge the co-authors. So Yanju, this is actually her talk that I just rearranged and put my name in front. So, and then the co-leads of Arishal Mehra, Neil Barton. Then from the program office, Jason Anderson, Kevin Garrett, and Mark Olson. And then there's this whole SFS development team that will be named later. So briefly, this project started last year with appropriations from Congress of $5 million to the National Weather Service and $7 million to OAR. And on the National Weather Service side, the bulk of that $5 million is going to SFS development. And on the WPO side or OAR side, that $7 million is spread out over many, many things, and only a small piece of that is actually going to SFS, unfortunately. There are many objectives, very ambitious, and just want to highlight the things in the red is that we want to, we do intend to create a couple of reanalyses that will provide balanced initial conditions across the ocean, ice, land, atmosphere, whatever number of components we have, interfaces, and to maximize these long-term predictability, these small signals that sometimes if you initialize with unbalanced initial conditions, you have these shocks that we lose those information. We also want to minimize the systematic drift, so we get the right teleconnections and such that thing, and we also want to reduce false alarms. And we want to have, a proper ensemble that really truly represents the uncertainty. And we want, again, there's systematic drift and the biases are interrelated, that we want to improve the physics and dynamics to remove the systematic biases. And we want to actually build up the SFS infrastructure so we could run this on the cloud. Because I think it was in the first day, we're saying, this is an application that maybe could do really well in a cloud environment, because it is really maybe once or twice a month that we need a burst of forecast. Seasonal forecast doesn't need to be run every single day. So, and in the way the operational framework works is that it's better to do something every day continuously to fit in there a little chart, and this doesn't really map onto that. So the major goals are to, develop the seasonal forecast system version 1 to replace the teenage CFS2 now. I think it's 13 years old. And there's a lot of errors in CFS2 that are also common in the other models of national multi-model ensemble, such as the MJO propagation across the maritime continent, false alarms, blah, blah, blah. I'll go through all the details here. And we will release the coupled system to the public. It's out there, it's on GitHub right now. And also the reanalysis reforecast data sets will be released to the community. And I also want to say, it's not in this talk, but we also have NOAA open data dissemination access to basically share our experimental results to the public too. And there's nothing up there yet except for initial conditions, but we want to have a framework where everybody could do evaluation on all the experiments. So don't need to spend much time on here because you've seen many slides on the UFS, but it's just here for completeness. I'll skip over that. And then going into this SFS application team, we have 10 focus areas that are here, and they're all interconnected. So we have a physics and dynamics group, we have a land group, a marine group, aerosol atmosphere composition focus area, section or team focused on ensemble development, that's initial conditions, model uncertainty, ensembles for data assimilation, and so forth. Then there's the design, testing, and analysis focus that really integrates all of these pieces. And then there's also focus on process level evaluation, having diagnostics people working directly with model developers so we understand. So the diagnostic people are doing things in a framework that then a model developer says, oh, okay, I understand what the problem is now, I go try to fix it, instead of somebody just saying your model's bad. Then there's a whole section on improving coupled DA. Now this coupled DA here is really, it's weakly coupled DA, not the strongly coupled DA. That's more of a research topic. But a lot of it for reanalysis is producing the observed data, is curating the data set of observations in order to do the reanalysis. And that's been ongoing for a while. And then there's the reanalysis reforecast section, and then verification and product development that's connected to the valuation piece. And then also, I don't know why it's standing alone, but there's the infrastructure and cloud strategy part that a lot of, there's two pieces there. One is there's a lot of internal model development, and then talks about that basically how like everything's going to the CMEX coupler now, making things internally consistent. And then there's the workflow pieces where we have more flexibility. If we wanted to isolate a component, just run, you know, a forced ocean run or a forced atmosphere only, you could do this in the same configuration. So it's easy to compare experiments. And we're looking for, you know, community input on all of these, and searching for opportunities for collaboration. So quickly for this SFS design and testing, that we read the development plans that ECMWF has done, and this sort of guided our framework on how we're going to do testing. And we are going to have 3 different phases, and this is actually still up for, you know, maybe revisiting on how we're going to do this, because we're already finding that there's limited with how you could do this. But the first 2 phases will be done at a low resolution, 1 degree. And we know the physics operates differently in atmosphere at 1 degree than at ½ degree, ¼ degree. And so there are these biases that we're seeing that I feel like we don't want to be chasing down at the 1 degree. But there are many other pieces that we still could test at this 1 degree. So there's 1 degree, shorter, only 4-month runs, really testing initialization strategy there. And then phase 2, which would be, you know, more members, longer integrations, so it'll be a year long. And again, they'll initialize twice a year for 30 years. And then once we basically are happy with a configuration, we'll move to the phase 3 at ½ degree atmosphere, ¼ degree ocean. And what we're thinking is maybe within phase 2, we should actually go to the ½ degree atmosphere because of these strong differences in the atmospheric biases at the low resolution. And a lot of this stuff has already been talked about, or might even talk about there, so I just want to go over quickly. So there's a physics and dynamics section that the leads are Fanglin, Lisa Bengtsson, and Lisa Bernadette. And we already saw, you know, talked about hydrostatic versus non-hydrostatic, working on the radiation biases, working on these modes of predictability. And then there's working on land model improvement, basically, you know, try to bring in more interactive or dynamic land, looking at vegetation phenology, working on snow initialization and, you know, its representation. And the real big important part here is, and Clara talked about this on yesterday, is it's the initialization, is making a reforecast data set compatible to the real time. That's the big piece that we have to worry about. And then Jan-san, Neil Barton, and Wan Chu are the leads for the ocean and the marine piece. And basically, I feel like I'm going over here, so I'm just going to say there's a lot of development still in the ocean, looking at the vertical layers, mixing, sea surface temperature, parameterizations and whatnot. And then there's infrastructure. I already mentioned basically working everything through the mediator, basically using this exchange grid that will ensure energy and mass conservation between the different components. And also then they'll have these diagnostics to basically verify that we actually are being conserved. And again, there's the infrastructure working on, you know, putting this to the cloud, so we have that capability. And then these are the 10 leads, the 10 teams with the co-leads. I'll just leave it for a second so you can look at your favorite section. And there's a lot of overlap between them. And then briefly, I actually don't really want to talk this, but like I said quickly, it's, you know, there's $5 million from the NWS that's going to this, and out of the the larger sum that was going to OAR, only about 1.5 million going, and it's a big chopped up pie where each piece is getting relatively, not a small piece, but it's, because there's a lot of work being done here. It's not just let's, take this model, set the maximum run time to 9 months and just go forward. There's a lot of other pieces that are going, because this model was developed around a weather target, and there's different issues when you go out to 9 months. And I'm gonna skip this since there was a lot of talk already about the different versions. And I just want to say thank you. These are the QR codes for the development plan and the feedback form, which you've already seen. And unfortunately, since I had to make this presentation a week ago, these QR codes already expired. So hopefully I'll
right ones up front.
Yeah.
So we have a few minutes of questions and comments. Anyone?
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just curious, the pie chart you showed for FY23, which is ended, will end in FY24. And is it continuous funding to support this effort? Or because this is all.
So that's all. This is all. So there is FY24. We got money. I think it was about the same amount. I'm looking at, and she probably knows, but I don't have a pie chart for this year. Similar breakdown. Next year, who knows? The expectation on the weather service side is continued funding, so flat funding, but at that level. OAR, I don't know. I mean, looking at the president's budget, it's zeroed out, so we don't know.
I'm going to say a little bit for FY24, which has been executed, obligated already. So the FY24, there's certain four federal employees at EMC going to be hired, maybe in the process to be hired. And then one at PE and CDC we hired for SFS. So totally their effects component. Then the rest of the contract support is similar distribution at EMC. Slightly reduced because the FED's part take over the funds. Overall, it's still 5 million. And the OER side, I think Jesse, Mark, office, the increase from 1.4 something to 1.8 million. And by 24, it's mostly same GSL, PSL. Yeah, initially we have a 400K to support external PI from the community, from the university, so we did the 400K for FY24, trying to get a small funding to get a corporate institute. Those university professors really want to do the transition to R2 or put some module do testing. Yeah. I'm looking for the next year, FY25, if we have they are supposed to keep at least that level. So we need to identify the gaps, the weakness area, and also the missing part in the team. The current team may not know everything. Those we need the expertise outside this team to fill in the gaps. So if you are particularly interested in addressing certain things, talk to me. I hope next year we want to continue the community contribution.
Yeah, maybe we'll have more discussion session. There's one more question. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, no one's running behind, but so ensemble size of 21 is relatively small by current standards, and that's a very cost-effective way of improving the system is to increase the ensemble size. Is that being given any thought?
Well, this is just, that was just for our experimentation. We are the ensemble size for the operational target and the reforecast is still, we haven't decided on that yet. So that we could talk about more in the discussion session on what we should be targeting. But yes, I agree. We need to have a pretty good ensemble size. So.
Given that we have hydrostatic option and also we are trying to improve the efficiency.
Yeah. So, right.
The other questions there's all. Also.
Go around.
Yes.
Yes.
The key hearing that the results and
Yeah. So the question is, we always talk about the limited resources, and maybe we should simplify the system and basically, be pragmatic and just use what we have. And that's a really good point. And I think Robin might talk about that later. But that's something that we're on this an OAR. We are, exploring that, not independently of this, but as an alternative. Like, can we set up a much cheaper, simpler system that beats CFS2, because that's a pretty low bar, right? So we're that's definitely something we're considering. Yeah, we could maybe talk about that more in a discussion session. Yeah, it's an easy one. So okay, yeah, all right, probably should go on.
Okay, we move on to the next talk. So this should be given by Xiaqiong or Zhou, and she's currently in another conference. So I'm going to give the presentation. This is I mentioned earlier in my first talk about the option of the hydrostatic against the non-hydrostatic for the seasonal forecast application. Here comes more details. So currently, all the UFS-based applications are using the non-hydrostatic option. For example, the global GFS 13 kilometer, and the next GFS will be 9 kilometer, and also the ensemble forecast system. The hydrostatic option has been used outside of EMC for many other applications. For example, GFDR has used the hydrostatic option for their climate model for non-time AM4. There are also other committee users using the FE3 dicot, also using the hydrostatic option for seasonal or climate applications. So a few advantages. I think using hydrostatic option is suitable for the SFS and time scale and spatial scale. And it has been shown by the community and performed really well, and also it's reliable. I think bigger advantage is really computational cost. Without changing the time step, just switching to the hydrostatic dicot, it saves 12%, and then this for the 50 kilometer resolution, target resolution. Because we use the hydrostatic option, we can increase the forecast time step, and this two combined, actually, the model will be 40% more efficient. That's also related to the earlier question. With this save of time, probably we can add more ensemble members. Some disadvantage, of course, up to in the past few years, we have been developing the FE3 based on UFS using the hydrostatic dicot, and so the physics dynamics coupling probably did some work, and that's already show some of the challenges for the SFS development. I showed earlier one of the example is the some of the because of the hydrostatic option in the UFS has not been thoroughly tested. There's some of the gross error we found earlier, like the energy not conserved. That's issue being resolved. Also, I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of other options, dicot options we need to re-examine. We followed closely what has been used in ARM4, not exactly everything exactly. And I think we need to do more work to test some of the options. So far, we just following what it has been using and with our understanding and made some changes. So this also is repeated the earlier slide I showed. First, we just checked in the Atlas only forecast what's the impact of the hydrostatic and non-hydrostatic. We are glad to see the impact. Actually, it's very small, and the forecast scale, this northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere, and it is the 50 kilometer resolution. Atlas only the cases, 31 cases, 61 cases, so it's not a small case. There are adequate cases for this evaluation. We are glad to say that for the first weeks, the forecast scale actually is a little bit better than the non-hydrostatic. At the subseasonal time scale, they are compatible. The difference all within the statistical significance uncertainty. A few other parameters, metrics, and for the atmosphere only run, you can see the tropics wind, also the 250 millibar and also 850 millibar. They all show the reasonable performance compared to the non-hydrostatic or again or slightly better for the first 2 weeks. Also check the KPO. For this case, we run the model from a single unit condition continuous for 2 years. The difference side is the G-days analysis. Here on the starting line shows where the KPO maximum should be. You can see in both of the non-hydrostatic and hydrostatic model, the both capture the KPO reasonably well, and also even the semi-annual oscillation. This is largely due to our improvement in the stationary and the non-stationary ground rejects in the UFS system. In the current operation model, the KPO is 2 weeks, and the periodicity is about 1 year instead of 2 years. Now, a few examples showing the impact of the couple in the couple system. This is initialized from May 1st, the condition, starting from 1990 up to 2022. This is a 1 year forecast. Single member, no perturbation, that's the only control run. We use the IFS replay condition. Couple model has ocean ice and no wave and air source. This is the earlier version, the February version of the UFS this year. We run 3 experiments. First, non-hydrostatic, 50 kilometer resolution, and then hydrostatic 50 kilometer resolution. And I think many you probably have seen posters and also presentations showing the 100 kilometer resolution model. So as a comparison, we also run the 100 kilometer model as well, using the hydrostatic dipole. Still, we have some challenges for this seasonal forecast system. I mentioned earlier, the physics, dynamics coupling, also physics itself need to further improvement. We can say for both the hydrostatic and the non-hydrostatic, we still have large errors in precipitation forecast, probably overestimation, overall overestimation of precipitation. Also, we have this large code bias. Before we tune the interaction between convective cloud water and the radiation. So the code bias starts very early and amplifies with forecasting time. It appears, it shows in all the runs. So non-hydrostatic, hydrostatic, and also lower resolution. Given all these caveats, so we looked at the SST alarming correlation, just focus on the comparison between the hydrostatic and non-hydrostatic. For the 1 month lead, there are not much difference, but you can see the hydrostatic is slightly better. But at the 6 months lead time, the hydrostatic definitely showed a better forecast scale. If you look at this 3.4 ST alarming correlation, and this orange line is the non-hydrostatic. This blue line is this blue line is the non-hydrostatic. This one, red line is the non-hydrostatic, both at 50 kilometer resolution. But if you run the hydrostatic option, but at lower resolution, 100 kilometer, the 3.4 forecast scale is worse than the 50 kilometer. We looked at the MGO, so this filtered ORR, the correlation from the Indian Ocean and the propagation of the MGO and the eastward propagation, this observation, this non-hydrostatic and hydrostatic. The part one issue is hydrostatic seems the maritime barrier should is a little bit worse than the non-hydrostatic, but overall the performance matched quite well with the observations, and this northward propagation. So this is my summary. The hydrostatic and non-hydrostatic compared to determine SS model configuration. And so with this recommendation, all our future SF runs should be based on the hydrostatic. There's still more work to be done, especially how to improve the physics, dynamics coupling, and also the physics itself and RC interaction. All these results showed there is very preliminary. We still have this strong code SSD issue and to be resolved. Stop there, take questions. And, okay, anyone here?
You mentioned that there was an issue with the energy conservation and the hydrostatic.
Right.
I wonder, this study has a historical graphic showing like a expansion of the time. Did it stabilize? And I was wondering whether it had to do with the initial conditions, if it's initialized from the non-hydrostatic.
That's a good point. Mention that, yes. So the question is about the energy conservation and the ideal condition. Go ahead.
So I think the big difference between the non-hydrostatic and hydrostatic physics is in terms of the ways that you allow the model to resolve or you parameterize. And you did show that the MJO is slightly degraded in the hydrostatic version.
Right.
I wonder if you have looked at other kind of ways like the coupling between the troposphere and the stratosphere, which is strongly affected by the propagation of the waves. Like you did show the TPO, but there are also the subseasonal events that are strongly dependent on what's propagating from the troposphere into the stratosphere, and the gravity waves are the one that are being affected by.
Yeah, that's all good questions. I think we need to look into that and also potentially how to further improve the MJO within the hydrostatic framework. Of course, there's other things we need to check.
Okay, thanks.
How do we shoot this burning question, or should stop and we join the next presentation?
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I will be talking about the land surface physics in the seasonal forecast. At first, thanks my co-authors. Outlines and this land process related seasonal forecast. Here we focus on the two parameterizations. One is the flux calculation over the vegetation. The second is the slope parameterization, then summary. So based on the latest version of UFS, we prepared baseline forecast configurations. Here, special thanks to Xiaqiong and Kinter. And this actually is the atmosphere only. We test different resolution, C96, C91, and actually we did some cases and also use offline land surface model to long time. Current initial conditions, we just use the GFS version 16 operational. For the start, in the future, we will use the spin up and also with the DA, land DA. And first, vegetation, flux calculation of the vegetation. Actually, NOAA NP use two types. One is the vegetated type, another is a bare type. Over the bare type is very simple, just a flux between the land and atmosphere. Over the vegetation, more complicated. There are three fluxes for sensible heat flux. Actually, these three fluxes are balanced and also similar for latent heat fluxes. These fluxes actually are derived based on the surface energy budget equations. So in current version, NOAA use the Newton-Raphson iteration to derive the flux and variables. Left side is controls the current version NOAA actually they use the two stages. One stage is for vegetation canopy, use Newton-Raphson interlation to do interlation. Here we use 20 interlations to develop, then move to the underneath the canopy. So we call the two loop. And we propose the one loop, another alternative calculation, and interlation at the same time also canopy temperature update each interlation. And so this is quite different. Now move to check the results, and this is balance, this will heat fluxes, and you can see current two loop and a large difference for these fluxes. And with one loop, almost zero. So it's balanced, but latent heat fluxes is still, even with the one loop, is still not balanced, but there's some deductions. And we're still working on this issue. And you can see with CONUS large difference, we further check the time series, and for this southwest domain average, we just check the two lines. Yellow line is the sensible heat flux above the canopy, and you can see not balanced, the large difference for these two fluxes. And you can see this area is 400. And with the one loop, you can see the two lines overlap. Here we just noticed. So also fluxes are not balanced, but no energy lost here. And we use the NOAA offline to Java to test this impact. You can see this monthly average. It is the cropland. Blue is you can see increase the sensible heat fluxes, and also impact the snow. You can see reduce snow. And we tested long time seasonal forecast with the SFS C192. We start September 1st. We run the 5 cases, and here's the winter season. So after 3 months, we can see the humid temperature evaluation against ER5. You can see large bias. It's quite clear. Cold bias, warm bias, and one loop actually is reduce the cold bias, CONUS, Europe and Asia, and also the reduce warm bias in Greenland. Basically, it's the positive impact. And further check the maximum temperature against the CPC data set. You can see maximum temperature, it's quite clear as the bias here. With the one loop, you can see it's Europe, North American CONUS, it's a reduced cold bias, and also we can see reduce some cold bias, Europe, Asia. And this maximum temperature and the minimum temperature is quite clear. It's almost similar, but over the CONUS, North American actually in current version, it's warm bias here, and Europe is very cold bias. One loop actually is help to reduce the cold bias, and it's like for the maximum temperature to mean temperature. And also we move to the snow parameterization because we already see the large bias to mean temperature over the warm bias, cold bias, but one loop is still not enough. We actually there are a lot of reasons why Koster. Here we just actually in NOAA snow cover flashing is derived based on snow depth. In current version, it's almost 100%. It's a quite large. So, so we try to reduce tune the parameter to reduce the snow cover flashing for this one. Actually, just today's Ronnie gave a very nice talk. Here's we use his plot, and blue is the control line, black is observation, and Ronnie used his new scheme to reduce the snow cover very close to the observation. Here's his just used the walk test over the west corners. We can to test this scheme, similar scheme to the global domain. Here's the the results, as see the snow, the 2-minute temperature maximum, and this is against the CDC bias. You can see this sensitivity is enhance the snow cover fraction minus the control cell sensitivity test. You can see that over the East Asia actually is reduce the cold bias, but here the Northeast is increase the warm bias, and not help for Europe and Honus. It's also some impact. Another test is constant snow thermal conductivity. In current NOAA version, actually use snow thermal conductivity is a function of the snow density, and KIM clear they show the very nice improvement with the constant. And here we also use the test system of machine. You can see it's quite clear, reduce cold bias here, but over the northern hemisphere, it's increase the warm bias here. And also similar to the minimum temperature, you can see it's already current has already warm bias, but here the increase is worse. But Europe and Asia actually it's reduced a lot of cold bias here. So let's move to the summary. And actually we already prepared this HR3 is for atmosphere only. We just focus on the testing the land surface updates, and alternative approach is vegetation fraction over plus calculation of vegetation, and actually provide a very nice improvement. But here we see a lot of work for snow parameterization. In the future, we besides the snow parameterization, we also need to update the level A index. Current level A index just use the lookup table based on the vegetation type, and improve land atmosphere interaction. Also, we need to more land sensitivities updates and run more simulations. I should stop here. Thank you very much.
Time we'll go to the next presentation. Send an email if you have any questions. Sorry, Okay, so next presentation, then Lisa Bengtsson from NOAA. Please here.
Okay, so the title of my talk is the crucial role of the initial state in predicting MGO advancement across the maritime continent. And this is work that I've done with colleagues at the Physical Sciences Laboratory. So Fenglin already mentioned earlier this morning that we have done some physics changes, in particular to the cumulus convection scheme, to try to enhance our prediction of the Madden-Julian oscillation within these different UFS global applications. One of them was an introduction of a new prognostic closure to replace the Arakawa-Schubert quasi-equilibrium closure in SAS. And this is a prognostic equation based on a moisture budget. And in this work, we see that we enhance the relationship between low-level moisture flux convergence and precipitation, and it leads to some improvement in the MGO advancement. Another development for the cumulus convection scheme was a representation of cold pool convective organization by cold pool dynamics, and represented using a three-dimensional effects by cellular automata. And in this work, we do see that we get some enhancement in eastward propagation. We found an improvement in Kelvin waves, but also in the Madden-Julian oscillation. You can see, for instance, in those Hohmiller diagrams towards the bottom here, that far away from the initial state, you can get some kind of eastward propagation, and that's beneficial for the MJO. And we saw that with the cellular automata scheme that it's only implemented within the tropics, but we do see an improvement in OLR over the Western Pacific maritime continent, but also an imprint far away from where it's implemented on the west coast of the United States. And in this case, we were linking that to enhanced eastward propagation over the tropics. So I guess with the MGO and the maritime continent interaction, it's quite complex because there's an interaction between the MGO, the maritime continent, and subtropical jet. It makes it difficult for prediction in weather and climate models. And in models, as you know, the maritime continent can often act as a unrealistically strong barrier as the MGO is propagating over this region. So we wanted to look at how is our model doing in terms of MGO propagation across the maritime continent. So I just, as a start of this project, selected a couple case studies and just to see, looking at different MGO statistics. And in these runs, we sort of targeting the SFS. We were running the model tag. If you're familiar with the tags, it was called HR3, but 100-kilometer resolution, fully coupled, initialized from UFS replay. And we were sort of looking at these results and I was like, well, maybe we're done because it looks pretty good. And we saw that nice evaluation from Mingyun Chen from CPC yesterday. The GEFS version 13 is looking pretty good. And that was over the Dynamo case. And this is also the Dynamo case. So I started looking at that one a little bit closer, running at different resolutions. So the yellow here is 100-kilometer, green is 25, and red is a 9-kilometer. And this seems to be some, in this particular case study, some indication that a higher resolution is beneficial for the advancement of the MGO as it propagates over the maritime continent, which may be because we're resolving the smaller islands more, or it could be simply that our physics is better tuned at those resolutions. So the question then was that I was asking is, could it be that the propagation and amplitude of the MGO is relatively good in these cases I looked at, because we initialized with a state close to, I guess, a state-of-the-art reanalysis product. It's the best we have right now is ERA5 or S5. So the question I asked is, what's the impact of initialization? So I have two set of experiments. One we initialized from UFS replay, and we replay to ERA5 and or S5 with a technique generated by NASA GMO. And the second set of initialization comes from the GEFS version 12 reanalysis, was generated by NOAA PSL. And I run 10 ensemble members using the same initial condition perturbations. And both runs use the exact same ocean, ice, and land initial condition, and the exact same model executable. Only the initial atmospheric state differ. So I ran 13 cases with 10 ensemble members, so about 130 simulations for each of this pair of experiments. So here's an example of these three cases I was looking at. And here you see, so the black and the blue curves represent observations in this case, using U200 and U850 winds from GEFS V12 reanalysis or ERA5 reanalysis respectively. And they agree quite well, which is reassuring. The orange line is representing the one initialized from UFS replay. And then this green line is when the UFS initialized from GEFS version 12 reanalysis. There's a couple things that stand out. Like one is that we have a lot larger amplitude when we initialize from GEFS V12 reanalysis. We also see that initially there's somewhat of a shift in the phase space when we change the reanalysis product we initialize from. And perhaps to point out for this Dynamo case, the impact of changing resolution from 100-kilometer to 9-kilometer is a smaller impact than if we would change the initial state. And remarkably, this impact I guess, seen throughout the entire forecast time. So the question then is, what's the difference between the GAFSW12 reanalysis and the UFS replay reanalysis at the initial time? So here we look at specific humidity, the U component of the wind, and temperature biases against the IGRA radio sounds. And this is a difference in bias. So basically, we see that initially the GAFSW12 is a lot drier in the lower boundary layer than the UFS replay. We also have an enhancement in the U component of the wind aloft and slowing down in the lower troposphere. And also, quite interestingly, some very large differences in the temperature aloft at 200 hectopascal near the tropopause. We have a much colder atmosphere in the GAFSW12 reanalysis, which is going quickly to a warmer state aloft. So I focus on these regions for this talk, and just looking at the evolution of the forecast. So there's a difference between GAFSW12 initialized runs minus the UFS replay initialized runs. So we saw that we started off initially drier when we initialized with GAFSW12, and there's somewhat of a quick adjustment, but then we do see that the forecast remains drier throughout the 10 first days of the integration. Interestingly, we see with the temperature that was so much colder initially, it remains cold and has a very slow adjustment, and it remains colder than the UFS runs that we initialized with UFS replay throughout the entire forecast. The winds are quite similar initially, and I think that the differences in U200 is essentially an adjustment because we start with a cold temperature. So you can see, just looking at a difference map, overall in the tropics, the GAFSW12 reanalysis at 200 hectopascal is much colder than the UFS replay, and this creates differences in pressure gradient and an enhancement in the U component of the wind. And the U component of the wind is, of course, an important factor in the RMMI computation of the MGO index. So looking at the meridional average of the zonal wind component, so I have the U200 here and the U850 in black, and the solid are the GAFSW12, and the dash one is a UFS replay. And over the Maritime continent, we do see an enhancement in the U200, and also from mass adjustment, we see like with the GAFSW12 initialized runs, we get stronger divergence aloft, stronger convergence below, leading to enhanced convection, and then we see that in the OLR anomaly. So the kind of story that's emerging is that we have an enhanced north-south pressure gradient increase at U200 when we initialize with GAFSW12, and through mass adjustment, there's also enhanced convection. Looking at differences in some of these different cases in temperature, 200 hectopascal, GAFSW12 reanalysis minus the UFS replay analysis at the first time step, you do see that essentially the cases that are earlier than 2005 are much colder than the cases at later dates. And it's quite interesting. Within 2005, we started assimilating the satellite AIR's atmospheric infrared sounder. So I think that's quite an interesting find, that maybe if we do have better observations, we can get better initial state and then also better prediction. So maybe I'll just leave this here, but say maybe the main point I'd like to make is that we have done a lot of development and seen a lot of encouraging results with GEFs and SFS and GFS, but we we do initialize our system from a reanalysis product. And I think I like the comment by Bill the first day that our reanalysis product doesn't match our forecast system, and that's probably the biggest challenge we have right now. We need to start cycling to really understand what our forecast is going to look like. So I would like to finish with that.
Go ahead.
Replace using more
Yeah, so the ocean initialization is the same in both. So yes, I used the ORS-5 to generate MOM6 initial condition for both sets of experiments. So the only difference in these set of runs are the atmospheric profiles. Land is the same.
Lisa, we've got a question from Slack. I'm going to jump in here. Youngjin Kim asks, do you have any idea or results about how much impact would the hydrostatic configuration have on your MJO simulation?
Not beyond what Fabian showed in the previous presentation. I think we're still learning.
Well, maybe I have a question. You showed some of the tendencies after 10 days or so, seems the difference reducing. My point is probably after, once we start the cycling, hopefully we'll get closer to the...
Yeah, that's a hope. I just wonder if a lot of the development we've done in physics, once we start cycling, we see kind of tendency to go maybe warm.
So, the sooner the better we can start.
Yes. Yeah.
Second is now we move to the next one. Our last presentation, we will present virtually, and okay, she's going to party.
Weiwei, are you online?
Yes.
Excellent. I will stop sharing. Go ahead and share your screen when you're ready.
You see my screen?
We can see it. Go into slideshow. Excellent.
Okay. It is my great pleasure to be the last presenter of this session, also this workshop. So I am Weiwei Li. I'm from NCAR and also with Developmental Testbed Center. I will be presenting some of our preliminary investigation on air's interactions in the seasonal forecast system using hierarchical testing approach. So this work was conducted under the DTC and also collaborated with Zheng from NOAA GSL Lab. Also, thanks go to the SFS application team and projects, and also the whole DTC UFS physics testing and evaluation team. So the motivating questions of this small work is to use a case study, which is Dynamo, to discuss some issues or problems that we see in fully coupled seasonal forecast simulations. The first question we want to answer is why we see, SFC have a smaller diurnal amplitude in the forecast. And second one is why our surface heat flux is persistently high. And third is what are the key processes governing these issues using this case study. And then what factors may, prevent the MJO or the associated convection development in the model. And lastly, to what extent, like I said, can we use the common community physics package single COM model to help understand these problems? So the model's set up. The hierarchical testing for this case study really involves both fully coupled simulations with atmosphere, ocean, ice coupled with, together, and also the single COM model simulations. For fully coupled SFS simulation, we use the prototype HR3 tag in the UFS weather model repository. The simulations we initialized at October 1st, 2011 for 92 days. And horizontal resolution is about 100 kilometers with 127 vertical levels. And for the CCPP single COM model simulation, it basically used the same physics code base, as in SFS, but it is atmospheric only, with only a near surface temperature scheme activated. So there's no coupling to ocean. The CSU array average analysis product version 3 is used to serve as large-scale forcing and to initialize the single car model. For the initialization and simulation period, they are the same as SFS. And column size is equivalent to what SFS used, basically 100 kilometer. We also investigate, some scalability features with respect to the model performance. So we also examine 50 and 25 kilometer. So here shows the time series of SST on the left column and total cloud cover on the right column during the first 9 days of both the fully coupled SFS, which is at the top, and CCPP single column at the bottom. So black curves are observations and colored from simulations. So it clearly shows that the single column model can capture the problems that we are seeing in the fully coupled seasonal forecast system prediction, including smaller amplitude of the SST and overcast condition with cloud cover almost 100% during most of this 9 days. It also worth mentioning that similar issues are actually found during the whole 3 months simulation period. So we then, further look at possible connections between the SST amplitude, diurnal amplitude, and also the clouds. So we check the downward shortwave radiation to the surface. Here shows the time series of SST, total cloud cover, and downward shortwave radiation to the surface during the first 30 days of the simulation of fully coupled SFS. So as you can see here, it clearly indicates that SFS, which is in red, tend to overproduce cloud during these 30 days and leading to much less solar radiation to the surface, which in our opinions can directly contribute to the underestimated SST diurnal amplitude that we see in the fully coupled simulations. But how about, single car model? Can single car model reproduce this cloud radiative impact? So in single car model, we purposefully, divide the simulation period into 2 groups, inactive geophysics and active geophysics. So as you can see here, it shows that no matter which phases or periods we're looking at, the downward shortwave radiation to the surface is almost always underestimated compared to the observations, which is serious product. And this is consistent with what we have seen in the fully coupled simulation. So once again, we believe the radiation bias can directly contribute to the smaller SST diurnal amplitude. And in terms of the scale adaptiveness, we see that coarser resolution, especially like 100 kilometer, tend to produce more clouds and therefore less shortwave radiation to the surface. So this could be due to code base that we use. It is new, but not quite new. So we guess maybe latest physics code may help mitigate this issue, and this is something we're going to check in future. So in addition to the impacts of clouds and radiation on SST diurnal cycle, we further look at relevant surface parameters. Here shows the comparisons between single car model and SFS for near surface winds, surface heat fluxes. And again, black curves are from observation, which is trop flux, and colored are from simulations. So the thing that we see in SFS, which is on the left, is SFS tend to generate stronger surface winds, which also contributes to the smaller SST diurnal amplitude based on our knowledge. In addition to the cloud radiative impact that we discussed previously. So this is another impact factor that we think can contribute this problem. However, the byproducts of this, over-predicted near surface winds is we see that near surface heat fluxes, both latent and central heat fluxes, are overly produced in the fully coupled simulation, which is highly correlated with the overprediction of near surface winds. In a single car model, we find that something opposite is happening. We see single car model tends to actually underestimate the surface winds instead of overestimate, which obviously not a contributor to the SSD diurnal amplitude problem that we see in fully coupled simulation. And the near surface parameter in terms of scalability is not sensitive to gray spacing if you look at different color curves. So at the same time, what is common between single car model and SFS is the positive relationship between surface wind bias and heat flux biases. And it means that surface heat fluxes bias are attributable to the surface wind bias in the UFS. At least for this case study, we find something like this. Okay, so just switch the gear a little bit, since the analysis of SST diurnal amplitude problem indicates some possible, let's say, it's detrimental role of the predicted clouds. We are using the MJO, and we are using the MJO case, right? So we then want to check if there's any sort of connections between clouds and convection and MJO development. So here shows the time series of cloud fraction, with upper panel showing SFS and the middle panel showing single car model, and the calm water vapor at the bottom. So we see that there are three active MJO convection phases, which are marked at the top. So it shows that SFS actually has difficult simulating the deep cumulus with much lower cloud fraction, exhibiting for these three active phases. And meanwhile, if it fails capture almost all of the shallow to deep convection transitions as observed, in the observations. So there's no transition at all. And we believe, the transitions is the key for convection and MJO development. And single car model seems to be, much better in terms of representing the deep convections during active phases. However, the shallow and deep transition is still something like problematic, even in single car model. And looking at the precipitable water, it shows that both model has this dryness, tends to happen in active phases for both single car model and fully coupled simulations. And this problem seems to be, amplified in the seasonal forecast system. And, based on all of the previous studies, this will for sure to prevent the convection and MJO development, eventually. So since single car model, there's no ocean coupled to this model, and it was ingested with prescribed environmental flows. So we think the commonality between the single car model and SFS shown here may suggest issues in the UFS atmospheric component instead of the fully coupled configurations. So to wrap up everything in this small work, we found smaller SST diurnal amplitude actually seen in both a fully coupled simulation and in our single car model simulation. And there are two logical lines that we find. First is there are more clouds in the model, no matter which simulation we're looking at, and leading to less solar radiation down to the surface, and then contributing to the smaller SST diurnal amplitude. The second one is only seen in fully coupled simulation, is there are stronger near surface winds, which also contributes to the smaller SST diurnal amplitude. And the byproduct of it is it also leads to higher surface heat fluxes, and may contribute to the colder SST, as we see in some fully coupled simulation in some other studies. And it also worth mentioning, there's an opposite surface wind effects in fully coupled simulation in a single car model, and we think it is related to the environmental flows that are different, and also the coupling features between these two configurations. And second point is surface heat flux bias in the UFS. It is attributable to surface wind bias, at least in our case study. The third one is during active convective MJO phases, there's dryness, there's a dry bias, which is amplified in the fully coupled configuration. and also accompanied with less cloudy and a lack of shallow to deep transition. The issue remain mostly resides in the atmosphere component. And in terms of the skill adaptiveness, it is not noticeable in surface parameter, but if we look at the runs at a coarser resolution at 100 or 50 kilometer, it tends to produce more clouds compared to finer resolution runs. I will stop here and I'm happy to answer any questions. Zheng cannot hear.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Charter from Colorado State University. I had a question or maybe a comment regarding the small SST diurnal amplitude in the SFS. So yeah, I think you've shown pretty convincingly that reduction in downward shortwave radiation could be one cause for this, but I'm wondering if you've considered the role of your ocean vertical resolution in being able to just not capture the shoaling of the ocean mixer that occur in these strongly diurnally forced periods during convectively suppressed conditions. Because any heat input that goes into the upper ocean, depending on your ocean vertical resolution, it will be distributed throughout the depth of that uppermost ocean layer. And so with a more finely resolved vertical, a more finely resolved ocean, you can have a stronger temperature response to the same amount of heat. So that could be one factor that is limiting the SST diurnal cycle in the fully coupled simulations.
Thanks for the comment. This is very helpful. Thank you.
We do have a near surface temperature, but in this time, I think this is the that's all the talks for this session, and we'll give another round of thanks to all the speakers. So the next session chaired by Leo and I think Phil, right, for the discussion.
So now we're finally in the feedback session, and we'll have three invited speakers who hopefully have read the development plan and give their thoughts on this, and then we'll open it up for a general discussion. First will be Magdalena, so come on up. Oh, okay. There we go.
Well, thank you for inviting me to give this feedback. It feels quite a responsibility because my insight is limited. I read the plans and I learned a lot during these 3 days. Here is what I have to say. It's quite a naive feedback. I don't know how NOAA works really, and funding sources, etc., etc. So it's just from the point of view of implementing a forecasting system. I was quite impressed by the way in which NOAA has managed to bring together many strands of research and get a couple model that seems to be, the performance seems to be very good already. So congratulations on that. These elements include, some of them could go to this seasonal forecasting systems, others may go beyond that, but this complete revision of the coupled system is quite impressive. I put there the components that I think they are quite essential. Of course, there is the waves and the and the aerosols. There are forefront developments on this, both in the aerosols, also on the land and the atmospheric. So it's quite, I'm impressed, and I think that's the path for the long-term development. The adoption of JEDI, that has been a major effort. I think this is not the latest version. I had a slightly different, more updated version, but it's already yielding fruits for the ocean data simulation, for the land data simulation. And I think those are essential components for the NOAA plans for an Earth system reanalysis. And the diagnostics, they seem to be quite thorough, diagnostic packages for process evaluation, skill, but also for post-processing. So overall quite good. On upgrades, all the forecasting systems have errors, so they will always be imperfect, and we cannot expect to improve. Even the more strong errors, the more evident errors are usually very hard to solve. So the comment that I have is that the CFS version 2 is quite old. And just having an upgrade on an old and possibly obsolete system could help, because it will contribute to this idea that the information provided by NOAA is authoritative, with the state-of-the-art model, with no obsolete components. And that is gives a lot of confidence to users. And there is always added value, even if a model is not perfect, by having more variables, having timely updates, more ensemble members. And so one can add value to a system in many different ways. The integration and evaluation strategy, it seemed to me quite sensitive, but in the document I didn't see the timelines and I didn't see the different prototypes. I realized later on during these presentations that these prototypes exist and the work has started. But when I saw the roadmap, I said, I don't see what is going to be tested first, what is going to be added incrementally, what are the timelines for that. So I thought if we want to do everything by 2028, it may not be possible already, without these plans. The priorities, I think, there is a table with a set of priorities, must have and wishes. I think even the must have are quite ambitious. So maybe lowering the threshold is not a bad idea. For instance, I don't know how many of the initialization and with the JEDI may not be required for the first implementation. That can wait a little bit. It's the same pay emphasis on the consistency between the reforecast and the real-time initialization. The replay option, probably it seems to work. It may, so maybe it could be considered for the first implementation. Also, obviously, in the longer term, you want to have your own reanalysis. If the replay option is to be can be used for operations, consider probably moving to ORA S6 because ORA S5 will be discontinued. And regarding the complexity, I think the GEFS version 13 seems to be already quite good. So why not implementing it? But it's important to say what is the cost and readiness of adding more components, both in terms of implementation and testing, but also in terms of if we add an expensive system, then it will be have less ensemble members. So something to consider carefully. And the same applies to the land module. We have to consider the initialization, both of the aerosols and the land. Then on the wider context, the technology and science are rapidly changing. So we need to be adaptable and flexible, and a way of being adaptable is to have small incremental steps. So one recommendation is to have faster upgrades, but smaller. So this could allow including more machine learning elements in future updates that at the moment they are not considered, and I think you will need to have them either for representing some specific components, tendency corrections, or others. The other thing is the relevance of the Earth system reanalysis. They are of tremendous importance. There are myriads of applications beyond the initialization of reforecast. It is a very demanding activity. There are very few producing centers. NOAA should be one of these leading production centers, but they need careful planning. It's very complex. I think it's the most complex activity in our community. So I think it should not be rushed. Eventually, in the long term, one could harmonize, try to have a plan to harmonize the production of reanalysis and the initialization of reforecast, but one thing at a time. The other context is the existence of the NMME that, apart from helping to sample structural uncertainty, it has other practical benefit, and it allows quite a smooth implementation and transition between operational systems. So perhaps NOAA could continue running the CFS to implement a first version of SFS at the same time, simultaneously, and give time for users to start adapting. So I think that's something, a facet that has been overlooked, this smooth transition. So what are my recommendations? I think there are two, is adopt a strategy of incremental but faster updates, and consider the first update as soon as possible. So one question is, rather than saying 2028, is if we wanted to have an implementation in 2026, what is possible to deliver? If there is, I did like the idea of this minimum viable unit. If in 2026 upgrade is a minimum viable unit, go for it. Have at the same time a plan for successive incremental, so including other components. As I said, take advantage of the multimodal capabilities for the smooth upgrades, and consider the user feedback on the value of the seasonal forecasting system on output variables. And then I think the production of NOAA system reanalysis should not be rushed, but it's essential that NOAA contributes as a producer, leading producing centers. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Magdalena. We're going to save the questions to the 30 minutes at the end. Next up, go to the next slide here, is from Jim Kinter from University, George Mason University. Yeah. Okay, great. And the pointer, I think. All right. Thanks. First of all, apologize for my voice. I have a head cold, not COVID. I'm going to bounce back and forth between sounding like Frankenstein and Mickey Mouse, so sorry about that. Like Bill said, several of us were asked to review the SFS development plan. So I read the development plan when it first came out, but I reread it for the purposes of doing a review. And I'm going to put my remarks in two different buckets. First, talk about some positives, and then talk about some needs work. And I put Diermeier's diagram up there because apparently everybody has to show Diermeier's diagram. It's sort of like Randy Koster's diagram a decade ago. So now you have to show Diermeier's diagram. Anyway, I found the SFS development plan to be a very sound, conservative, and credible plan for developing an operational seasonal prediction system. It is very focused on operations. It is, of course, coming from NOAA. It's coming primarily from Weather Service and OAR. So the emphasis on operational capability is natural. It incorporates advances in a number of areas, like Magdalena just said. It's
quite an ambitious plan because there's improvements in infrastructure, an atmospheric dynamical core, and atmospheric column physics, land surface representation, ocean dynamics, sea ice representation. This is a 6-way coupled system, moving on from GEFS to SFS. So quite a complicated system with a lot of moving parts. The plan is also has positive aspects in the fact that it draws on developments from the past decades. So the transition from what people here at the Weather Service fondly refer to as the quilt to a more unified modeling strategy is great. There are components of this system that are coming from both NOAA and non-NOAA sources, which is also good, even great. It builds on progress already made in developing GEFS, the subseasonal prediction system. So gaining experience at the timescale that is just short of the seasonal timescale is good. And finally, it employs the same phase prototype strategy that's been used for global model development and even for the short range weather forecasts. There are some negatives, however, in this plan. And it's already been mentioned by Magdalena, and you know, sorry to beat a pony that's struggling here, but the planned delivery in 2028 is too late. It's 5 years after the allocation of funds from NOAA, and you know, almost as sadly, it's 17 years after the previous implementation of the current operational system. And I put a picture of a cicada up there in the corner because everybody knows this is my joke. The cicada is winning the race. The 17-year locust is coming back sooner than we're going to have a new operational system. I think the plan is overly conservative. I mentioned it's conservative. I think it's overly conservative. It omits a lot of potential experimentation that could be done, particularly outside of NOAA in the community over the next 5 years. And honestly, I don't see this plan overtaking peers. So if we look at other entities around the world that are making seasonal forecasts, I don't think that this system is going to be ahead of any of those systems at the end of the 5-year period. Now, all of this reflects the extreme budgetary limitations that NOAA has put on seasonal forecasting. That's a shame. Honestly, NOAA has all the people in this room, all the people who are online have their hearts in the right place and are desirous of getting to a new seasonal forecast system as soon as possible. But whoever is writing the budget hasn't heard that message. And so this effort is continuously underfunded and continuously overly focused, I should say, on the transition operations. Another negative is that a number of the innovations that are in this plan could have been proposed a decade ago. There's not a lot here that we didn't know. We knew what the biases were. We knew about land surface temperature biases. We knew about sea surface temperature biases. We knew about double ITCZ. These are not new problems. We've been working on these problems for a long time. We have some ideas about how to go forward. Some of the things that are in this plan may address those limitations, but others will not. And I found it, you know, honestly disappointing that there are a number of innovations that were not present in the plan. We don't see a lot of discussion about improvements in coupling. We don't see a lot of discussion about improvements in probabilistic prediction or in statistical analysis or in applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. I have more to say about that in a minute. And most importantly, the development plan, sorry about my voice, the development plan is not aligned with a strategic set of predictability research plans. So we know what's wrong. We have some ideas about how to fix it, but we don't have a strategic plan about how to prioritize and what's the process for making decisions. Just earlier, there was a question about ensemble size. And we have quite a lot of literature now pointing out that larger ensembles are in some ways taking the place of resolution, spatial resolution, in terms of improving skill. But in the plan, it's only vaguely described about how we might explore that. So we need a strategic plan for how to explore issues relating to ensemble size, coupling strategy, active components versus passive components. We also heard questions about the aerosol component at seasonal timescales. So all of these are strategic questions that require attention. The plan was developed entirely within NOAA. This is a personal bugaboo of mine. We have been talking, literally talking for more than 5 years about how to engage the community outside of NOAA and inside NOAA. The community is a big tent. It includes people inside and outside NOAA. How can we take best advantage of the intellectual and institutional and infrastructure resources that exist outside these walls? And nevertheless, after all of that talking, this plan comes exclusively from NOAA. So utterly no disrespect to NOAA's ability to develop a plan. Some of the best scientists in this area are at NOAA. However, none of the rest of us who are outside of NOAA had any input into this plan. Whether we could have made it better or not is moot because there was no opportunity to do that. And I put this ROMO, you know about FOMO. Well, there's ROMO. It's the risk of missing out on important innovations and also importantly other points of view. So people who are outside NOAA may have a different aspect on what is the importance of land surface initialization or what is the importance of aerosols. And that perspective didn't have an opportunity to influence the plan. You heard this in a number of other speakers earlier, including Magdalena just a few minutes ago. Reanalysis is a big deal. And to require a sequential development where the reanalysis comes first and then we get a new modeling system is going to make delays happen more and more and more as we go forward. We have to find a way to separate those things. Like I say here, delivery time only gets delayed, it never gets shorter. This strategy has been superseded at a number of the peer institutions where they have adopted a more agile, a more streamlined, a more economical, and a more efficient approach with continuous model development and checkpoints at specific intervals, specific time intervals, saying, today we shall implement a new model with whatever is working best today. And in parallel to that, longer term, lower readiness level research and development and a pathway towards a full up reanalysis that can deliver on a number of the different things that Magdalena just plotted out, not just initializing reforecasts. There's some vagueness in this proposal. A lot of places where it says this will be explored or this will be considered. You know, again, this is a personal remark. If I had submitted that proposal to a NOAA NOFO, it would have been rejected because it's too vague. Because we are always expected when we write proposals to NOAA funding opportunities to be as specific as possible about what we're doing. And in particular, like Magdalena pointed out, no timeline for how these things get delivered. A more robust and comprehensive view of the prospects for introducing machine learning is also needed. Let's see that I cover everything here. Yeah. So machine learning is revolutionizing numerical weather prediction. We've been seeing in the literature just within the last 6 months where people are beginning to employ machine learning algorithms for seasonal prediction. And that has the potential to take all of us by storm and you know, the phrase is with our pants down. So we won't be prepared for it. There needs to be a much more robust recognition that machine learning has the potential to revolutionize the way we do things, even at the seasonal timescale. I think I'm finished. Yep, all set. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks, Jim. Our last invited speaker for this session is Randy Koster from NASA GMAO. And
Had you open? Where did it go? Apologies.
And the advance key is.
You can just use the arrows of the mouse.
Okay, thanks very much. Compared to the previous two speakers, I might seem like a lower echelon, so I thought it necessary to bring in a ringer, Sig Schubert, who actually led the S2S project at Goddard for several years. So a lot of what's going to be said here has some real meat to it, I would say, for that reason. And I also want to point out that I set this up before hearing the talks here at the workshop. So it might be a little bit dated. If I had known more, maybe things would have changed. The second thing I want to point out is that, like when you review a paper, at least when I review a paper, I point out things that need to be corrected before the paper is accepted, and focus more on the negatives than the positives, because positives are already done. Maybe that's not the best way to do it, but this is going to focus on more of what Jim had as negatives as opposed to positives, even though all the positives that Magdalena and Jim have mentioned, I agree with. But we were wondering what NOAA wanted from this review, and it could be a rubber stamp of approval, and that didn't make any sense. Why would they call us in to do this work just for that? Or a careful critique of the plan, focusing on uncovering deficiencies that if you have an updated document, maybe you can fix. And we did focus on this second thing. So I hope my talk doesn't sound too negative, but we did focus on a critique more than emphasizing the positives, and maybe that was a mistake, and I apologize. But an overview, overarching comments. The plan as written is very ambitious, in some ways overly so. I'll expand on these points as we go along. It can also arguably seen as a strategy to catch up to other existing systems. The connection to GEFS development is unclear. The strategy for development testing is somewhat vague, and the expected development paths will be something like a laundry list. And I'll expand on this as we go along. The ambitiousness of the plan, if you just read if you know the scientists who are working on this, you know that they know how difficult all these problems are to solve. I have no doubt that every scientist working on the issues, MJO, El Nino, drought, weather extremes, all this stuff, you know how difficult it is. And these things have been addressed by various S2S forecast centers for decades, and only incremental improvements have been made over time. But when you read the plan, it sounds like, yeah, we recognize these are problems, but in 3 years, we're going to solve them and get this plan out the door. And when you read the plan stated in those terms, it sounds a bit unrealistic in terms of how much you can actually solve in a 3 to 5 year time frame. And secondly, the generation of a new reanalysis is not realistic as described. This has been touched on by the previous reviewers. It's overwhelming to put out a reanalysis, and just to throw that in as something that we're going to do as well comes off as a bit unrealistic. The proposed system in the context of what's already out there, it could be argued that the system is not going to be, Jim touched on this, it's not going to be obviously superior to what's already being done at other centers. It might work great, it might work fine, it might be one of the things you consider when you look at seasonal forecasts, but not necessarily the unique go-to player in the community. Maybe that's fine with you folks, and that's fine. But it would have been nice in the proposal itself to have some overview of what's already out there and how this SFS system would fit in with the state of the art. The connection to GEFS, that was very confusing in the proposal. Just the second bullet here, are these in fact 3 separate systems? It wasn't clear, or just one unified system. And Siegfried was keen to point out this last bullet, and I think Magdalena said the same thing. If you want to expedite getting these things out, having a single system for both subseasonal and seasonal, if you can do that, you can probably go much farther. And the first bullet just basically says the proposal is a bit vague about what's going on in GEFS, and that GEFS itself is somewhat under development, and how the issues specific to seasonal forecasting will be addressed. The proposal was vague in those questions. The development methodology, they had a 3-phase approach, and that's fine, and some discussion of agile development, which kind of went over my head what that actually meant. But the phase 1 approach will presumably be the workout course for model development. And if you want to test to see whether or not your model works better in a forecast environment, whether you can improve your forecast, you need to do a set of phase 1 forecasts for every model change you're testing? Or how do you actually determine what's going to be allowed in a phase 1 set of forecasts, and how many of those can you actually do realistically? And if you combine them all to save on computation, how do you interpret the results? Does it come from this change or that change? That was a bit vague. The three-phase approach in general came off as a bit vague in our opinion. Finally, the proposed improvements read something like a laundry list. There's many things that they list they're going to address with us insufficiently clear connections to predictability research. What do you really need to initialize right to get a certain increase in forecast skill? Some science-based prioritization of model development would have helped the proposal a bit. And again, I'm focusing on what was in the proposal, not on all the talks we've had this week. Could there be calls for predictability research as part of this proposal? Maybe, I don't know. The document does say that it wants to encourage new research and development activities to integrate with NOAA operations. But it doesn't say anything about predictability research, which could be very important. Final comment is, and I'm repeating exactly what the previous two talks mentioned. What's truly missing from this proposal is a timeline. What can you realistically complete in a 3 to 5 year time frame with existing human power and computational resources? That would have been very helpful for this proposal. And managing such a large mix of development efforts targeted for this system, some of which are likely out of the control of this project, would be a huge task. So a development timeline would have been very helpful in this sense. I want to just finish with a quote from George Bernard Shaw that said, "Those who can do, and those who can't teach." And then in the context of this meeting and in this review exercise, change it. Those who can write proposals like this, they do it. And for those of us who really can't, do it a much easier thing. Just read them and point out things that could be better. But it is much more difficult to actually put together a proposal like this. And we recognize that and appreciate all the work that went into it. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Randy. Actually, I don't want any of you to go too far away, because now we're going to the part where it's an open discussion about this the development plan or specific questions to the three presenters. So if there are any questions or comments, I see Bill's getting up. Thank you.
I'll throw in a quick comment from Slack.
Okay.
Royce Fornot says, Jim's point on a more agile approach certainly fits in with Ken Grant's charge to the Weather Service of being more nimble and responsive. Might be something like to think about as we're going through this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so this will be a perspective from another prediction center, somewhat like the ones we've been hearing, and I found much to agree with in all those presentations. So just to add, so coming from the perspective of Environment Canada, I think the plan is admirably ambitious, given with some of the caveats that have been expressed. I mean, certainly given that I understand that the Earth system reanalysis will not be ready to use for SFS initialization, I think that a realistic approach is being taken to the reforecast versus real-time initialization issues, and kind of creative approaches to ensure that there's sufficient consistency. And but I think the main thing is awareness of that, whereas if any issues do appear to be developed, that solutions can be sought. In terms of so there's this kind of tension between research and development. So I found some aspects of the plan maybe belong more in a kind of a research framework. So one is the emphasis on aerosols. And I think from global research perspective, that's very much of a frontier area. There's really no model-based studies of seasonal prediction of air quality that I'm aware of. There's a little bit in the subseasonal time scale, but I mean, there's sort of many facets of that area. This is something we looked into a little bit in Canada. We didn't have resources to pursue it, but yeah, I mean, certainly the predictability you get kind of knowing emissions in real time is, you know, pretty limited to the kind of timescale influence of those emissions, which is somewhat on timescale of days. I think you can't really predict future emissions, you know, except in these certain cases such as dust. So what you're really targeting, I think, is the impact of future climate on kind of the climatological emissions, and this would be influenced by things that are, you know, fairly well studied, like atmospheric circulation. I did notice there was a NOAA climate working group white paper. It didn't have a date, but based on the references, it was, you know, in the last couple of years, and written by people whose names we don't, including speaking in this session. And they, although the main focus was on shorter time scales, they did, you know, mention that I think the one recommendation was NOAA should explore the feasibility of seasonal air quality predictions, and they mentioned, you know, planetary boundary layer predictability as influencing that. I guess it's kind of a probability of inversions, but the main point is this seems very exploratory still, and if it you know, works on the timeline about timing implementation of SFS, and it's, you know, going to, you know, be a value, that's great. But I think that, you know, there's potential value there that maybe should be considered a research stream currently. Maybe the same goes for phenology. There's a few exploratory studies I'm aware of, you know, having interactive phenology that's interactive may enhance some aspects of forecasts. But again, if that's something that is, you know, holding things up, then maybe that should be sort of considered a research item. Yeah, sort of similar comments on machine learning. I think, yeah, there's a lot of kind of potential value there, and it's exciting, but you know, things are changing so rapidly. I'm not sure implementation should depend on that, but I think one exciting possibility is talked a little bit about bias, tendency adjustment type bias correction as a pragmatic way of reducing model biases, and the application of machine learning to make those state dependent versus just climatological ones just starting to be explored. I think GFDL is doing that, and certain others. And lastly, one kind of aspect of the predictions has been viewed as problematic, mentioned several times, but I think might be a little bit of a red herring is the overprediction of normal in the ensemble mean. So because nature is not an ensemble, and if you average, you know, 100 or more ensemble members of the NMME, you know, that collapses the variance of the prediction. And certainly in cases where, you know, some of the variance is going to be, you know, the actual annual variability, but a lot of it is noise. Probably in North America, most of it's noise. So by filtering out the noise, you're kind of throwing away a lot of, you know, what one realization that one ensemble member would, in fact, give you a below normal prediction, even in a climate that's not forward. Started to look at that in the Canadian system, and certainly if you look at individual ensemble members rather than a grand ensemble mean, that you see below normal frequencies that are much more similar to observations that the other ways to look at this.
Thanks. Right, thanks for your feedback. Does anybody else have any comments they want to bring to the room? I know.
Yes, I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Shukla. This is based on what I have heard repeatedly from these three reviewers, that even after everything is done in this plan, or what is can be done, it will not be a state-of-the-art model. There will be systems which will be much better than that. A political conclusion of that will be, why are we doing it? But I'm not following that. I'm not proposing that. But I would really like to suggest serious consideration of the second proposal that was made also in this presentation, that can we just concentrate our effort to just continuously improve GFS and see how by 2028, so put these resources in getting, and all the knowledge we have learned from the development process. So by 28, we will have actually a seamless prediction system, which we still may or may not be the best in the world, but it will be towards that trajectory. In other words, this idea of having multiple seasonal prediction systems in the world, I mean, I think still there is some value, but just given what has happened in the last so many years, is it just something I want the committee to consider, or the people who are in charge, is that how about simply putting their efforts in really improve GFS and go towards this seasonal prediction system and try to learn. You probably, I mean, this is my personal guess, you'll be better, you'll be far ahead if you did that, rather than trying to do this project in parallel. Sorry if this may sound too radical, but that's my reaction to these presentations.
All right, Shukla, thanks for your comments. I do want to respond. This is not being done in isolation of the GFS improvement. They're all highly tied together. Really, the only differences between these targets, these applications, is resolution. It's, we had these talks about, the trade-off between ensemble size and resolution, and for the longer leads, you want more ensemble, so we can't afford to be running the GFS resolution. So we have to make these trade-offs. It's the same system, really. The difference is the resolution.
Oh, that's I didn't get that. So you're saying it's the same system, except the resolution?
Yeah, it's the same system, but the GFS will be developed. It'll be implemented in like a year and a half or so. So there's going to be continuous development on the GFS, and those developments, are connected to the developments in this model. So they're all marching along together. And it's whenever, you just say, this is the operational implementation, you freeze the model. And it's a continual development, and you have to this date is GFS, this date would be SFS. That's
okay. I like that much better. I'm sorry I didn't get that impression. Okay.
Yeah, maybe these things are lost in.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks. Thank you.
So this is Steve. Okay. So I'm just curious. I very agree with some of your the reanalysis is a kind of a much larger task, but it's important that it may not be tied to specific of the prediction system. But on top of that, a lot of the talks I've heard in the workshop is about model development, like different components, different identities. But in my opinion, it's kind of also a separate string of things compared to the development of prediction system. So they are not. I don't see why they have to connect together. Like we have to have all these improvements ready for the prediction system. Because in my opinion, so I designed a sphere prediction and developed the sphere prediction system, which we did 3 to 4 years ago, and it's kind of a separate thing from the model development, because PFDL itself is focused on model development of all the components. And we take all these very small tweaks to the models in terms of resolution and the certain parameter schemes. And in my opinion, the prediction system is more about integration and initialization of the balance between the components and the DA system that we did. And you can, like I said, you can put out prediction systems while the model is doing incremental updates. So I don't see how the model development is the main bulk of the work for a prediction system. Because in my opinion, that's the bulk of the work for this system is outside of model development. So that's just my opinion. So when you separate them together, and it's kind of, it makes it much more clear in.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, because I know when we were writing this, I was talking to the model development people, and it's like, looking at this as a 5-year plan, the model development, I feel like that needs to be sorted out in the first year, because there's all these other pieces we need to do to build this system that we only have like a year to, work on that piece. Because again, that's just a small piece of building a whole seasonal prediction system.
It's the most important piece.
It's the most important bit, but it takes the other pieces take so much time.
If we want to improve prediction of YouTube data estimation, I'm not going to wait until TFDL finish all ECMWF 7 development or has to have any updates or any ability in the prediction system. I don't see how. I mean, TFDL is as your ocean, sea ice, land, they are continuously updating all the models all the time incrementally. But they are not tied to predictions. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Aaron, from the microphone.
Go back to your previous comment about check that all this model development is not happening as SFS, across GEFs and GFS. So why we do so much focus here in this workshop or in this implementation plan about the SFS development is all model. I mean, take a system and go ahead with implementation, have a baseline as Magdalena was saying in 2-3 years.
Yeah, I mean,
model development is a broader activity, is independent of SFS.
Yeah, so I mean, that's why I think, but part of this workshop, the model development is, one piece that's, across all of these. And nothing is unique, because even like the initialization strategy to reforecast, that's not unique to seasonal either. I mean, GEFS is also doing that. It's just that I think the timing is good for this workshop, to focusing on the SFS, because, the GFS and GEFs are going to be frozen within any day, well, not any day now, but soon. So that ship has already sailed, unless you think about the next implementation. So I think it's more of a timing too. Like, this is thinking about this. And
just a naive question: is the model development plan similar to this for the GFS alone?
Well, is Avichal, because I remember talking to Avichal a while ago, and I thought they didn't have a plan like this for the other components.
Well, why for SFS?
Honest.
Yeah, so as Phil was saying, the idea of this workshop was essentially to bring together NOAA folks with our stakeholders and with the broader community, get some inputs on where we are right now, where we want.
Model development or SFS development?
Or SFS. But GEFS, as Phil said, could be frozen any day for the next year. So that does not mean we stop development of GEFS or GEFS. Those developments will keep going. The idea behind this workshop was to collect inputs on where we are with the GEFS system, our plans, and where we are going with CF. The model development is not going to stop. There are developments, innovations coming in every single day on GitHub, which get tested and committed, pull requests and then committed after the regression testing. So that model this workshop has actually nothing to do with model. Model development is being ongoing with the broad community. And I think a couple of presentations showed a list of 150 people. One more different parts of the system. Physics, coupling, whether it's ocean model development, CIS model development, wave model development, aerosols, all those things are continuously ongoing. So the context here is that, okay, get feedback on, and we got some very nice feedback last time, as to where things are, where the GEFS and SFS system today, and where you want to go.
Now it's like to add the other part of my goal of this meeting is to get these other pieces of NOAA and of the external community that use these seasonal forecast systems as an application. Like, what do they care about and in our development process, we should be paying attention to those things too, not just a T2 meter forecast goal over CONUS, and so I want to get, have the developers see the other needs.
That's the comment about all three present reviews had just the over ambitiousness. I mean, do you really care for interactive aerosols, vegetation, interactive vegetation, non-hydrostatic versions for seasonal forecasting?
Asking me personally.
I mean, it's a basic.
My intention was, in this plan is, these things we want to test them. Right? We want to see, bring in what's worth the cost, right?
Ben Green, Security stuff. So, I saw every reviewer commented on the timeline, and I've seen this timeline go. I think it was FY26 was the first one. So we're already 2 years. But my point is, I've seen an example in SubX where there is an experimental is a very key word here, experimental version of GIFs running 35 days, correct?
That's right.
And I think that it could be considered to run some sort of experimental version of SFS before 2028, because experimental gives freedom and also allows for feedback from users, and users can, like, especially if you get some of the input, or not, the outputs that maybe I should not get into that, but you would start to get feedback from users, and if you keep having that experimental label all over it, you don't get the 2 a.m. call from NCO. No, I'm serious. What is stopping? What are the boundaries? And then I just want to get.
No, in principle, it's a great idea, right? So we are running experiments all the time.
Yeah.
Only thing is, we have to make a decision as to what to make public. Because once you make things public, then we are kind of on the hook. Even though we put experimental all over the place, you would not believe the number of emails I personally get when we switch something up. So it says, so anything which we do, we have to view it from that lens. And as Jim was pointing out, any of this, if you want to do it every day on a regular basis, it requires considerable amount of resources. You just babysit. You run experiments, so you know what I'm talking about. So it is a commitment. So we have to be very careful as to what we want to release to the general public. And if it's limited typecast, like what we did with our prototype development, it's much easier. But anything which we want to do in real time, continuously, we have to view it from that.
I'll make one very quick comment. I guess what I would say is maybe start like once a month, and then even just in-house, like just to see can we do it, and then just in-house, not even, you can put it on the web and not even advertise it. No, I'm serious. I mean, because the amount of experiments that I run, if you add them up, I could essentially just start and instead do a real time once a month. I don't know, just sort of
anything real time was staging of data, grabbing all the conditions and making so that they are available and consistent with what we did earlier. That by itself is.
Henrik, Ben Cash is waiting for you to jump in.
To realize that public cell is only 4, and it's working. You got to do less, and you got to do more, you got to do it slower, and you got to do it faster. As always, within those 4 requirements. But going back to what you're saying, I like the idea of having a rolling experimental version that you keep checking around with. And it works really well on the smaller timescales. But on the larger timescales, from my experience before I was in Italy, the longer the timescale, the more people do post-processing of the things behind it to get more information on it. And you get, on the one side, you have people who want to say, we really need to update our outlook system faster. But we also have a lot of users who say that the more you tinker with it, the less I can use my bioinformation and all the other things. So it's a real sort of field of tension where I believe that the idea of being able to run a system experimentally is easier to do on short forecast timescale.
Ben, then Christina.
So I also did read through the development plan, but the idea that this was the version of GEFs that you can afford to run for seasonal did not really come through.
Okay.
It definitely felt like this is its own thing. It was SFS version 1. We're doing the development for. So given that frame, now I really wonder, drilling down to the plan a little bit, what those 1 degree runs are really.
Well, it's. I mean, I'll try to answer that. So it's not just taking GEFs and running it out to 9 months or 12 months, whatever. I mean, our starting point is GEFs at 1 degree. That's where we're going. And, again, we're going, even our target's half degree. We, the physics operates differently. So it's not going to be just GEFs half degree. It's going to be, there's going to be changes. Just the way, there's GEFs 12, GEFs 13. It's a continuing evolving thing. So it's starting with GEFs. There's going to be updates, and there's Feng, do you want to answer this better than me?
I'm going to finish that thought though, but if what you're doing is you're following along with the GEFs development. The GEFs development is happening for the GEFs target resolution. So every time one of these updates happens, and then you are trying to keep SFS synced up with that as it's moving forward, you're going to have to do this whole thing where you come down to C96, try to solve the problems at C96, which may not appear at your target resolution at all. I really wonder if you're buying yourself more headaches by trying to firefight problems that far from the developmental resolution of the model, rather than just coming down periodically from GEFs. What do you need to do 2 GEFs to run at the resolution before to run it at? I feel like you're just buying yourself more trouble in your
I just want to quickly that it's there is where we are learning is that this plan is it's a plan. It's not we're looking to modify it as needed, and we are realizing going to the 1 degree there are differences, but solving these problems at the 1 degree really aren't necessary because there's no it's a research version, but it's not going to go into operations that way. So we're actually considering less focus on this 1 degree because of those issues, but there are still lots of things that we can learn for 1 degree, like looking at like sea ice initialization, land initialization. I feel like the 1 degree is a lot of its focus on initialization strategy, on ensemble strategy, not necessarily atmospheric physics. Your
ice is a totally different resolution too.
The vertical is the same, and then a lot of that stuff is not the horizontal, but Franklin, respond.
On the spot, I want to explain how this is the physics done in DMC. Usually with the GFA escapes and the CFA side, I think earlier, they are using the same phase terminations. So this is once a week physics. Of course, the physics not across scale or we are talking about sending different, but gas speed. There are also operators running the model. We can also just give physics to run so we can nitrogen physics actually run as one. Our ability to run it without any more as it do that makes the paper use it. Not just as what you get up with. We are not even applications. Response also the leafing structure, we are using different states. They're awesome. Just a clarification.
All right, thank you, Christina.
Yeah, so we learned about the comment regarding the lack of timeline. And I think in addition to the lack of timeline, I would also add the lack of measure of success. So you tried to explain why you want to start with 1 degree, but if that would have been, explained in the plan, we consider a measure of success running 1 degree. If this happens, probably this would have come more clear. And also, it's a big project, and usually you have contingency plans if things don't work, and that's also the target is operational implementation, which is great, but there are other measures of success, and I'm not talking about saying in the plan that you want the anomaly correlation to be larger than what it is coming out, but having the community ready to be able to run this version of the model probably would be a measure of success. We're demonstrating a 1 degree that something you are expecting will happen, things like that. So probably that will also help the development plan.
Thanks, Christina. Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to ask you guys to think like a cicada for a minute. So the cicada stays underground, sucking nutrients out of the tree roots, getting better and bigger and happier, and then comes out to make another cicada. So the cicada's cadence is 17 years. You guys have CFS V2 in 2011 and SFS V1 in 2028. That's 17 years. Are we going to wait another 17 years for SFS V2? What's the cadence for that? And I'd like to ask if there's any thinking about maybe actually publishing a cadence schedule. In other words, think about HAFS. HAFS has a new version every hurricane season. How do they do that? Well, they set targets, they make realistic assessments of what they might be able to accomplish between this hurricane season and next hurricane season, and they go for that. And then whatever, come what may, they implement. Next hurricane season, HAFS is different. Hopefully better, but certainly different. When SFS V2 comes out, we hope it's better, and it certainly will be different. But when is that? Is that going to be driven by, a skill score has gotten better enough that now it's time to implement? That's kind of been the modus operandi for global models in the past. What if we radically change that and think about every, let's make it a really fast cicada. What about every 3 years, we have a new seasonal forecast system? Not a new reanalysis, but a new seasonal forecast system every 3 years. And you've got it on the calendar. There's a date, and I'm not talking about moratoriums and R2O and da-da-da-da-da. I know all about that too. But what if there was just a big red circle on a day 3 years from now, or 3 years from the previous implementation, that says that's the next SFS version, version N+1. How would you operate differently if that were the situation?
Well, I'm not EMC. I'll just quickly, and then I'll let you just respond. Is that I think that's a very ambitious case, considering how long it takes to do the reforecasts, right? It's like you're going to do the reforecast, you go operational. When there's there time to improve the model? Because then you're going to get, okay, I'll start reforecast again. I haven't done any model development. So you need to have that time to make those improvements. If it's parallel, you have like a developmental team, and then you have these other people doing a reforecast. That might work, but it's much easier for HAFS because you don't have all these reforecasts. You have a dead time in the winter where you're not doing operations. So I think it's not an easy comparison. But now we'll put off, and then we'll wrap up after you too. It's already almost that much time. Yeah, sure.
But no, you mentioned that that's quite important consideration for the frequency. At least at the ECMWF, that's a little constraint. The frequency of updates on seasonal forecast. If you work longer with forecast, it's not only regardless when you have to produce them or either on the fly or 9 months before, it doesn't really matter. This amount of required. So there is a proportion between the cost of the real-time seasonal forecast system and the fraction spent by the reforecast. And that's huge. The reforecast is huge. And for the SOS, the reforecast period is going to be years and it can be affected every year. But for seasonal, the reforecast period, if we want to have 60 years reforecast, every 4 years. So that's one consideration. The other thing that I think is important, it didn't cross my mind at all that this SFS was not linked to the gas. And my assumption was that we were going to take a cycle of the gas. What else is needed for that? Maybe fuel for the resolution, maybe with additional components like can vary greenhouse gases for the reforecast. Initialization essential. The CIs, the cover to the ocean and to the CIs, that's essential. But this development should go back to the gas. Yes, so it's not considering having a couple system of maybe forecasting.
I mean, the full system, even like the next GFS will be fully coupled and you know, again, the developments that we're doing at this 1 degree are tested at the GFS resolution, all that stuff. So there's still this feedback.
And I forgot something that is very important. To accelerate this cycle, it's essential that any release of the gas is electricity seasonal forecast. So part of the evaluation metric is at least it doesn't degrade.
Yes, we have had those conversations, but that's a really good point. Thank you.
So it's already exceeded the next 2 questions. First of all, the program document that we published 4 years ago said that everything will love to be able to do this system every 4 years, so it's on paper. On the practical side, there's a whole bunch of practical reasons why it's not being done. The one is the fact that you have the GFS, GDFS, and the seasonal forecast system as the present whole system. The fact that we working on all of them together now gives a better chance to do it on a shorter time scale. But the thing that really slowed down, the 2 things that really slowed down nothing happening after CFSV2 is that CFSV2 was funded as a one-off funding for one model with a team for 4 years. Funding disappeared, team disappeared. The fact that we are now looking at a seasonal forecast system as part of the suite that is regularly supported by the industry should take away that the problem we had that the whole thing fell apart because of funding. So with that, I hope that we will be in a position that we can do that much more often. It's easy for me to say because unlike others, I'll help the The other thing which is still, I think, a really big issue, it's not just a question of running the reforecast on the analysis that we say that need to be part of every release. I mean, how also that same roadmap document. We still have the problem that a lot of people, particularly on the large output time scales, do a lot of their own tweaking of their products with the reforecast on the analysis, and they ask us to be very slow with updates because of the amount of work they have to do to adjust to a new forecast system. So this I was not joking when I said we have to do it faster, we have to do it slower at the same time. So communication with the product community to create their own products based on the seasonal forecast system is something that we need to make sure that our downstream users are also getting into an idea of that in this much faster and setting up their statistical and other techniques to improve the outcomes in such a way that they do not force the industry to do it slow.
All right, then. Thank you, Henrik. And we are breaking into our lunch time, so you can continue conversations over lunch. I want to thank our 3 presenters and the rest of the audience.
To everyone online, we started back up at 1:30 sharp. We'll see you then.